Now let's move on to the Input tab. This is where the fun begins. This is where you create your questions, your prompt questions for the client, and select the types of fields you want, and all that fun stuff. So before we go ahead and create it, I'm going to swing over here the spreadsheet with the questions. And I'm going to review these questions with you so you understand when I built this, why I'm doing it a certain way. So now let's look at that first question. Is this request for yourself or someone else? Now, some of you may have exposed the on behalf of option that we have built into the product, allowing you to open tickets on behalf of somebody else. You may have also fine-tuned it to allow clients to open on behalf of somebody based on the role hierarchy, or perhaps in the same account, and kind of limiting them as to who they can open tickets for. And that's fine. You can leave it like that. You don't need to have this first question. But adding this question here kind of opens it up. It allows anyone to open this request on behalf of anyone. So this was an option that was asked by the provisioning manager, so we're going to go ahead and fulfill this option. So if the individual selects myself, well then obviously their name will be in the client field and they can go on, with all the other questions. But if they select someone else, we want the next one here saying please select the individual, and that will be a lookup to the user object, and we're going to add a filter to display only active users, and that will be required. So although it's required, it won't be required if they select me, but if they select someone else, obviously it will become required. So our next question is this request for hardware or software? This will be a pick list allowing the client to select one of the two options. This will be required, and they're only allowed to select one of the two options. The reason why the provision manager wants it this way is that when they do their reporting at the end of the month, they want to be able to distinguish between one client ordering hardware and that same client later ordering software. It's two separate requests. They don't want to have these 2 or 3 selections on one request. They want this separate for a reason. So the next question is a dynamic question. If the client previously selected hardware, well then this question will ask them to select the hardware they need. This will be a lookup to the CMDB. We're adding a filter on that lookup to only display items in a hardware class, but not all the items. We added a custom field on that class called display in self-service, and we filled in the checkbox only on the items that we want to display in self-service, like keyboards and CD-ROMs and maybe monitors and so on. We don't want to display everything from that class. This field will also be required. Now the next 2 questions will appear if the client would have selected software. The first question is asking them if this request is for a Mac or a PC, because the list of applications that will be generated may not be specific if it's for a Mac or a PC. This will be a radio button. And the second question will be a lookup to the application class, and will display only the applications that are available in self-service based on that same custom checkbox field. And the next question we will be asking them is to provide their cost center, which will be a number field that will also be required. And finally, a field called any additional comments will be added, and that will be a text field that will not be required. So we're going to go ahead and create this now in our request definition. So I'm just going to fast forward through this section. This is just a standard radio button with 2 options that we're going to make required. Alright, so now we're going to create the second question. We're going to create the lookup to the user object, and we're going to make sure that we select only active users. So we're going to make this a lookup, and it'll be on the user object. And if you look on the list, you may not see user here, so you'll have to search for it. We'll select user, and you'll see the filter. Now I don't have one here, so we'll create a brand new lookup filter, and we're going to call it all active users. It will be required, so we're going to look for the field called active equals true. We're going to add that, save it, and we're done. Now we have the lookup to the user object, and we only want the active users. So the prompt question will be, please select the individual. and we know this will be required. Now this question will be a conditional question. We only want it to appear or displayed if the previous question, so this question here, equals someone else. We'll save that. And now we can save it. Now we have our two questions. So let's go on and create the other ones. Our next one is this request for hardware or software? And this is supposed to be a pick list. And the pick list values will be hardware and software. Add this. This is a required field. And we hit save. Our next question is to have them select the hardware that they need. Now before we start building this one and creating the filter and the lookup, let's flip over to the CMDB to have a look and see how we did this. And then right click CMDB, open a new tab. Now the way we have it in this CMDB, I have CD-ROMs that I want to make available in self-service. Those are in the BMC_CD-ROM class. I also have keyboards in the keyboard class, and I believe I have monitors and printers as well. So I have to make sure that those 4 classes are listed in that filter. So now if we look at one of these, let's grab monitor 1, and if we go to the specifications tab, you'll notice a field, a checkbox, available in self-service, and this is checked true. So all of the items that I want available on that request have this box checked true. We have to make sure we add this as a filter as well. So here we are, we've just created our filter. So we added the available in self-service equals true, and then the class names are the 4 class names that we want. Now I just created these, and you'll notice at the very bottom is the actual logic. We need to change this. So it'll be 1 and 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. So let's change this. Now let's save it. So now we have the lookup created, we have the question, and we're going to make this required, and we're going to save this. We also need to make this question conditional. So it's only visible if the previous question is this request for hardware software equals hardware. Alright, now we can save it. Now we're going to save the request, and we're going to go test it to make sure that we're actually displaying the right information. So we'll go back to self-service. We're going to refresh this tab. Now let's select it and see what happens. So now let's test the complete request so far. It's displaying correctly. We don't have any of the other fields displayed just yet. So now if I select myself, nothing happens. If I select someone else, I'm expecting this to display another box to select individuals. And this will list active individuals. In this pick list, if I select hardware, here's the additional condition allowing me to select just hardware that should be displayed in self-service. So let's click on here and let's double check. We're seeing the CD-ROMs, the keyboards, the monitors, and the printers. This is working as designed. Let's cancel that and return to the request definition. Alright, our next question is asking them if this software is for a Mac or PC. So this will be a pick list, or no, this will be a radio button. And the values are Mac, PC. This is also required, and this is also conditional, and this question will only appear if the previous question was software. So is this request for hardware software? So if this equals software. All right, and we can save this one. Now we'll do the next question. And this is the software question. So obviously they've selected software. Now we're asking them to go and select the software they need. This again, like the hardware, is a lookup to the CMDB, or the base element object, and we're going to add a filter for software. Let's go ahead and do the lookup. And this will be the base element. And the filter, it's a new filter. Available in self-service equals true. And then class name equals BMC application. Click OK. And this one here, the filter logic will stay the same, 1 and 2. Both have to qualify in order to display the right information. So we'll click Save. And this will be required. And the condition for this one will be display this, again, if the previous question had software selected. Alright, now we can save this one. And now our next question is to ask them to provide us with the cost center. And this will be a number field. And this will be required. And this will be a condition. We only want to display the cost center field after they've selected either hardware or software. And this is by design. Personally, I like it when the form looks very simple when they open it. Then, as they fill it out, other related questions appear on the screen. Now we can save this. And the last question is any additional comments, and that'll be a text field. And that is not required, and that'll be again the same condition as the cost center. Display it only after they selected either the hardware or software question. Alright, and we'll save this one. So our request is basically complete. I'm going to save it, and we're going to go in self-service and test it to make sure everything is displayed properly. We haven't talked about the invoking a template at any given time yet. We'll do that in the next step. So let's refresh self-service. And we're going to select the request. Alright, so again, I'm only seeing a few fields on the screen. Obviously, if I go to myself, nothing happens. Someone else, here's the pick list of active users. Now, is this request for hardware or software? If I select hardware, I get a few more fields. Select the hardware. Let's double check the hardware list. Still looks good. So now let's try the software option. I am seeing the additional question, is this software for Mac or PC? And please select the software needed. This should give me a list of software. That works good. And the cost center, additional comments. Now at this point, everything looks good. So let's cancel here and we'll go back to the administration. So we have some instructions we need to add. So here are the instructions. Please populate all the required fields and allow 7 to 8 business days for delivery. Pretty straightforward. I'm going to save this again. Our next step is to add the task templates and then finally complete the fulfillment tab.